Frankie "The Answer" Edgar, one of the UFC's best ever fighters. A legend of the lightweight division, the man who dethroned BJ Penn. In 2019, at 37 years old, Edgar will attempt to reclaim UFC gold against Max Holloway, a man many consider one of the greatest featherweights of all time. The fight is almost certain to be a thriller, but what brought Edgar to this remarkably long career among the world's elite fighters? For SBN MMA, I'm Shaquille Majuri, and let's take a look at how a lightning-fast fire hydrant of a wrestler from Tom Rivers got all the way here. The story starts way back in New Jersey, where Edgar was born on October 16, 1981. The oldest of three children, Edgar led the way athletically amongst his siblings, wrestling in high school at Toms River East with legendary coach Warren Reed. He placed second his junior year and fifth his senior year at the New Jersey State High School Wrestling Championships. While a standout, Edgar was never top dog and had to fight for his success intensely. After high school, he moved to Clarion University in Pennsylvania, where he qualified for national championships all 4 years, competing up at 141 pounds with a final record of 120 wins and 55 losses. Not long after graduating from Clarion in 2005, Edgar took his first MMA fight with only a few weeks of training. He battled back from early struggles with timing to beat Eric Urisk. Eventually, he got the fight to the mat, securing mount and getting a first-round TKO, raining punches down on his prone opponent. After the win, Edgar was hooked. He fought 5 more times over 2005 and 2006, even earning himself a unanimous decision over future UFC Hall of Famer Jim Miller. After his 6th pro win, Edgar tried out for the Ultimate Fighter Season 5, but he was turned down for the show. However, not long after, he would get his call to the UFC against Tyson Griffin at UFC 67, headlined by Anderson Silva's somewhat infamous bout against Travis Lutter. Edgar went on to win the fight via unanimous decision, a performance that would grant him his first of many Fight of the Night awards. That win at UFC 67 brought Edgar to fights and victories over Canadian Mark Bocek and then top contender Spencer Fisher. In April of 2008 at UFC Fight Night Florian vs. Lauzon, The Answer would meet one of the greatest rivals of his career, Gray Maynard. Maynard, who had actually been on the tough season Edgar tried out for, defeated Edgar in their first bout. It was Frankie's first loss, a loss that clearly pushed him towards greatness. Edgar would go undefeated in his next 8 bouts, including his 2 fights with Penn and a pair of rematches against Maynard. This saga, that would lead to one of the greatest rivalries in MMA, started with a win over Hermes Franca at UFC Fight Night Silva vs. Irvin, and was followed by a solid victory over former champion and continuous contender Sean the Muscle Shark Shirk. That set Edgar up for a title eliminator against dangerous finisher Matt Veach. Veach was undefeated heading into the bout with 11 straight wins and had just come off a TKO over Matt Grice. Edgar ended that run with his incredible grappling, catching Veach in a rear naked choke in round number 2. What followed was a shot at lightweight GOAT, Hawaiian superstar BJ Penn at UFC 112. The first of their 3 meetings was by far the most controversial. Many thought Penn beat Edgar on the night, and to this day, some people still think the champ got robbed. But BJ got a rematch only 4 months later at UFC 118, and this time there was no debate. Penn was defeated convincingly, and Edgar had cemented himself as the undisputed champion. He dismantled the prodigy, showing clear growth between their 2 matches and a crispness and pace that Penn could not handle. Edgar returned to action quickly and with a ready challenger, the man to hand him his only official loss. A rematch with Gray Maynard was set for UFC 125 3 years after their first meeting. Following the Ultimate Fighter, Maynard put together a fantastic winning streak, including victories over Nate Diaz and Kenny Florian and, of course, Frankie Edgar. Edgar's first title defense against Maynard would go down as one of the greatest fights in lightweight history. A contest where Edgar was dropped hard early and beaten down. Edgar had to weather a massive storm in round 2 as well, but he came back with a fury, landing a massive slam. Over the later rounds, the fight stayed close, but with Edgar seemingly edging the rest. The resulting scores were wild: 48-46 Maynard, 48-46 Edgar, and a 47-47 draw. A split draw and one of the only draws in UFC championship history. A fight of the night, fight of the year, and one of the greatest fights in MMA history, the fight defined Edgar's grit and toughness. The rematch was scheduled for October of 2011 at UFC 136 in Houston, Texas. And much like his fights with Penn, this time Edgar would get his chance to truly defend the belt and put any arguments to rest. The champion made his adjustments and took the fight to Maynard, knocking him out in the 4th round. Edgar shot in for a takedown and, as Maynard came to his feet, blasted him with a right uppercut. He pounced on his fallen foe and pummeled him unconscious. Vindication in spectacular fashion. The following year in Japan, Edgar took on WEC champion Smooth Benson Henderson at UFC 144. The beginning of yet another controversial decision and another immediate rematch. Benson edged out Edgar in a fight many thought the champion won. It was the answer's first loss in 4 years, but like his recently defeated foes, Edgar got an instant rematch later that year in Denver, Colorado. This time, however, the results would be no more definitive. Henderson again edged out the New Jersey native, effectively ending Edgar's career at lightweight. Over his run at 155, the 5'6" Mark Henry-trained fighter had never cut weight, but in 2013 he dropped to 145 pounds to fight the greatest featherweight of all time, Jose Aldo. Aldo convincingly defeated Edgar with his immaculate takedown defense, leg kicks, and dynamic striking. Suddenly, Edgar was on a 3-fight losing skid, but it was against some of the best talent in the world. In July of 2013, the UFC gave Edgar a dynamic contender in Charles Oliveira, a fighter known for submitting almost everyone he could get a hold of. Edgar game-planned perfectly. He mixed his boxing and takedowns together with ease, clearly defeating his Brazilian foe. Exactly 1 year later, the UFC would bring Frankie Edgar and BJ Penn back together as coaches for The Ultimate Fighter. Both men had made the move to featherweight and were looking to take on Jose Aldo and potentially regain UFC gold. This time, Edgar put a stamp on their rivalry. He dominated, finishing Penn in the 3rd round on the ground with punches. He left no debate. He was the better fighter. That win brought him a bout with all-action favorite Cub Swanson. He submitted Swanson late in the 5th in Austin, Texas on November 22nd, 2014. The following summer, Edgar would finally get to fight someone his own size, the California kid Uriah Faber. Faber was chasing money fights after years as a bantamweight contender, and a bout with Edgar was another chance to headline a UFC card. Frankie was able to manage a decisive, if cautious, win in the Philippines, setting himself up for a match against Faber's teammate, a man who had given Aldo one of his toughest fights, Chad Mendes. In an absolute stunner, Edgar knocked out Mendes, and once again, he was in title contention. In the years since Edgar's first fight with Aldo, Conor McGregor had come and gone, knocking out Scarface in only 13 seconds before abandoning the division to make his run at lightweight. In the Irishman's absence, the UFC needed an interim title fight. They set up Edgar vs. Aldo 2 at UFC 200. Their second fight was a bit of a deja vu, with Aldo earning another strong win over the former lightweight champ. A second title run continued to elude him. But Frankie didn't waste time, jumping back in for a match against the knockout artist Jeremy Stephens. Edgar avoided his opponent's prodigious power most of the fight to earn a solid decision. That set Edgar up against one of Mexico's best talents, Yair Rodriguez, an incredibly dynamic and fun action fighter. Much like his bout against Charles Oliveira, Edgar planned carefully. He took it to Yair, putting a clinic on the prospect with takedowns, guard passes, and ground and pound, eventually ending the bout via doctor stoppage. That win was supposed to get Edgar his shot at newly minted champion Max Holloway, who won his own thrilling pair of bouts against Aldo, but continuous scheduling issues and injuries created a different plan. Edgar ended up facing top prospect Brian Ortega instead. In a wild turn of events, the grappling dynamo from California became the first man to knock out Edgar with a beautiful uppercut in round 1. The win gave Ortega the shot at Holloway that Edgar was supposed to have earned. The loss could have been devastating, but the Mark Henry-trained talent handled it with grace and went right back to fighting. 6 weeks after his first KO defeat, he took a rematch against Cub Swanson, outworking him on the feet this time rather than the canvas. Over a year has passed since that last win. Holloway has returned to featherweight from a losing effort in an interim lightweight title fight against Dustin Poirier. This will be Frankie Edgar's 8th title bout, and much like his first, it comes against the best Hawaiian fighter in the world. Holloway has looked dominant in his run to the belt. Edgar may be one of his last real challengers, but the answer is 10 years his senior, and Blessed is on a 13-fight win streak at featherweight. Edgar may be a former champion nearer his twilight than his prime, but it's clear he's earned his spot. And, win or lose, he'll go down as one of the greatest fighters in MMA history. Whenever he finally does hang up his gloves, the MMA world will be a little worse off without Frankie Edgar fighting for the title. What do you think is Edgar's best shot at UFC 240? Let us know in the comments below, and please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more MMA goodness just like this.